morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us for this press conference. My name is Jamon Hicks, partner at Douglas Hicks Law, and proud to represent Dalia Ferlito, Dr. Melina Abdullah, and Justin Marks in a case against the District Attorney Jackie Lacey and her husband, David Lacey, for the tragic and reckless incident that occurred on March 2nd, 2020. Mr. Douglas will give us a briefing on the allegations from the lawsuit and the specifics, and then we will hear from our three Black Lives Matters plaintiffs. So with that, Mr. Douglas, it's on you.
Thank you so much, Jamon. Good morning. This is a case about the reckless use of deadly force and the shocking consequences to three peaceful protesters. Let's go back to Monday, March the 2nd, 2020. A collection of peaceful protesters had gathered at a location not far from the Granada Hills home of District Attorney candidate Jackie Lacey. Among them was Dr. Melina Abdullah, president of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, and a professor at Cal State Los Angeles, head of the Pan-African Studies Department. Among them was Dalia Ferlito, a long-standing member of Black Lives Matter and a frequent protester of the policies of Jackie Lacey. And also among them was Justin Marks, a longtime supporter and peaceful protester of Black Lives Matter, who was there in part to film what was going on, which is a traditional part of the Black Lives Matter experience. You gotta understand that while this lawsuit began on March the 2nd, 2020, this case actually began months and even years earlier, because candidate Jackie Lacey had promised the community that she would meet with the community before the March 3rd primary election. But she had failed in that promise to meet with the community. So these peaceful protesters decided to take the community to Jackie Lacey. Therefore, it was in the early morning of March the 2nd, 2020, that members of Black Lives Matter gathered peacefully, non-violently on the sidewalk outside of Jackie Lacey's home in Granada Hills. There were men, there were women, they were Black, brown, and white. They were gay, straight, trans, and Q, members of the community hoping to have their voices heard. As is customary at all Black Lives Matter functions, there were rituals that were first performed before walking up toward Miss Lacey's door. There was a recognition of the ancestors who had passed before. There was a ritual and a rite, pouring libations, which was a customary Black Lives Matter rite. There were chants, there were drumming of buckets. It was clear that these were peaceful protesters who were protesting Jackie Lacey's candidacy, just as they had done every week for more than 2 years outside of her office in the Hall of Justice. And then, after those rituals were completed, 3 of the members decided to walk towards the door. Dr. Melina Abdullah went first. Dalia Ferlito was a few feet behind, and Justin Marks with his camera, filming everything, walked up as well. It's important to understand that these peaceful protesters didn't hop some fence to get onto her property. It's important to understand that these peaceful protesters didn't go banging on some window or on some door. It's important to understand that there were no trespassing signs or other barriers that would prevent visitors from walking up to the front door. As the three protesters walked up to the door, Dr. Molina pushed the Ring doorbell. She pushed it once, and then she waited. She pushed it again, and then, while filming, you could hear some sort of a metallic sound on the other side of the doorway. Dr. Molina turned to her other allies and said, "That doesn't sound good." And then, shockingly, and without any warning whatsoever, David Lacey opened that door, pointed that gun at Dr. Molina's chest, at Dalia Ferlito's body, and at Justin Marks as well. I love Dr. Molina Abdullah for her poise, for her intellect, and for her commitment to justice. But I saw in that moment another reason that she is a hero, a shero to me. Because in that moment, with that gun pointed directly toward her face, she stayed poised, she stayed calm, and she stayed committed to her years of training in the struggle. That her words were, "Good morning," trying to de-escalate what has become a recklessly negligent circumstance. And in response, David Lacey, with venom in his words, said, "Get off my porch or I will shoot you." Dalia Ferlito was stunned by those words. Justin Marks could not believe that this man was saying this while being recorded all the while. And then he said it again, "Get off my porch or I will shoot you," with his fingers on the trigger. Ladies and gentlemen, clearly that was designed as an act of civil protest. And clearly, civil protest, if effective, is never comfortable. It is supposed to be uneasy. It is designed to get attention. But never in a million years did any of the 40+ people that were there ever envision such an outrageous, such a reckless, and such a careless use of judgment by David Lacey pointing his duly registered firearm at these peaceful protesters. The Attorney General of the state of California has seen fit to charge David Lacey for his recklessly criminal act. And now, these proud Americans are also using the justice system to make right. It is in the filing of a lawsuit that was filed yesterday on October 18th, 19th. We're filing 4 counts. 1 count of negligence for negligently deciding to grabbed that registered firearm. We allege that David Lacey did not make that decision on his own, but that he was aided and conspired and discussed what to do with District Attorney candidate Jackie Lacey. So she too, aiding and abetting that reckless act, is every bit as responsible as if she were holding that gun herself. Not only do we allege that it was negligent decision to get the gun, knowing that there were peaceful protesters there, there was a negligent decision to arm the gun, to activate the gun. There was a negligent decision to put your finger on the gun, which was a clearly reckless act. I've been suing police officers for more than 40 years, and every police officer will tell you that you never point a deadly weapon at someone unless you intend to use it. Here, the recklessness was so self-evident. David Lacey could have sneezed and his finger pulled the trigger, and I would be representing Melina Abdullah's children, her 3 beautiful babies instead. That is one reason why she cannot allow this reckless act to go unanswered. But not only are we suing David Lacey and Jackie Lacey for negligence, but as important, we are making a statement in favor of civil rights, because David Lacey and Jackie Lacey were well aware, we allege, that the people ringing the doorbell were protesters, not some home invaders. Were protesters, not some criminal element. Were protesters, not gangbangers of any kind. So that show of deadly force was designed to quiet and silence these peaceful protesters. Under the law, that is wrong, and we will seek justice to right that wrong. And if there is collateral damage and Jackie Lacey is not reelected because the people of Los Angeles County think that her judgment does not allow her the privilege of representing the good people of Los Angeles County, I say, so much the better, and let's see a change. I'd like now to call on my clients, Dr. Melina Abdullah, Dalia Ferlito, and Justin Marks, to describe what happened that morning.
Thank you so much, Mr. Douglas. We're very grateful. We're grateful that you helped us to kind of understand what our options are here. And we want to be very clear that the work that we do is work that we believe that we're compelled to do on behalf of our people. That when we think about the 622 people who've been killed by police since Jackie Lacey took office, and her refusal to charge any of those officers, we call it our sacred duty to stand up on their behalf, to stand up in the name of John Horton, to stand up in the name of Frederick Williams, to stand up in the name of Riddell Jones and Waukesha Wilson. And so we've been protesting Jackie Lacey for almost 3 years now, since October 25th of 2017, when the twin sister of Keisha Michael urged us to say Jackie Lacey has to prosecute the police who killed her twin sister as well as so many others, because if she doesn't do it, then these murderous officers are able to just hop from law enforcement unit to law enforcement unit, even if they're fired, as were the 5 officers who killed her twin sister. And so we began, when Black Lives Matter was birthed in 2013, and when Jackie Lacey was new to office, we began by asking her for meetings, by asking her how we could work with her, by asking her what barriers are there that we could help you topple so that you can prosecute police who killed Ezell Ford. That was the first person we went to her for. And she continued to turn her back on the constituency that elected her. For years, we asked for her help. And when she refused in 2017, we realized we had to start pressuring her. And so she's not unfamiliar with us. She is more than familiar with us. She's met with us. We've had closed door meetings with her. She's heard from us. We've run into her at events that we've been at, that she's also attended. We've had phone conversations with her. We've written her letters. We've had sent emails. We've done everything that we could to get her attention. Finally, as she ran for office for a 3rd term, she was pressured by people who had become aware of the way in which we were trying to get her to hold police to account, and in the process holding her to account. And one of the Democratic clubs, the Stonewall Democratic Club in West Hollywood, was successful in getting her to commit to a community meeting with Black folks that included Black Lives Matter and the families of those who've been killed by police. She committed to having that meeting by December 2019. She did not have that meeting. So we decided that before the primary election took place, we were going to bring the meeting to her. And we know that as she's running for office before the pandemic took place, that she was frequently in Los Angeles, in places like downtown and West LA by 7 o'clock in the morning. We'd been outside of some of those meetings that she was having, trying to get people to support her or donate to her campaign. So we knew that it was important to get to her house before she left for those meetings. We loaded up a bus from the Crenshaw district of Los Angeles and brought the meeting to Lacey, since Lacey wouldn't come to the meeting that she committed to. We stood, as you accounted, on her, just off of her front lawn. We poured libations. We had a prayer circle led by Reverend Dr. James Thomas. We did a land acknowledgement with our Indigenous comrades. And then we began to set up chairs on the public sidewalk. As that was happening, I decided, and I'm very familiar with Jackie Lacey, she's very familiar with me, to walk to her door. I asked Dahlia to walk with me, and we rang her Ring doorbell system, which I have the exact same system at my home. It captures your image, and you can see precisely who's at the door. And again, she's very, I expect. Never did Justin, Dahlia, to be greeted with a loaded, and it's called cocking. I don't use guns, but slid the the mechanism to put the bullet in the chamber. That's what we heard before he opened the door. And when that gun was pointed at me, pointed directly at my inches away, the first thing that went through my mind is, what about my children? And I was grateful that we had prayed. I was grateful that we had meditated and poured libations, because it allowed me, when he said, get off the porch, and pointed the gun at my chest, it allowed me to summon spiritual energy and a sense of calm that allowed me to just say, good morning, in the friendliest, most chipper way I could muster. And it allowed me to not panic, because I think that if we'd had any other reaction, as you said, you may be representing my children. My children are deeply traumatized. They heard about the incident on the news as they were in school. They had to be pulled from their classrooms and brought in to sit with counselors. I still am from the experience. As you mentioned, we ascribe to the principle of nonviolent direct action, the same principle ushered in by James Lawson and Martin Luther King and all of the peaceful protesters of the civil rights movement. And we did not expect to be threatened, to be shot for stepping onto the public porch of a public official who had promised us a meeting. And I want to pass this to Dalia Ferlito and thank them for being with me and always being by our side as co-founder of White People for Black Lives, which is our primary ally organization.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me. Thank you for putting this together, Mr. Douglas. And of course, I would like to begin by echoing the sentiment of the foundation of sort of what was occurring for the years prior to that specific morning in which we were on the porch of Jackie Lacey, because that incident did not occur in a vacuum. So I think it's really important for the audience to understand that this is part of many years of attempting to use existing channels to have the voices of the families heard and responded to and respected, and as well as action on the part of the district attorney's office. And unfortunately, those regular channels that are afforded to the community members were outright ignored, dismissed, denied us, and we were silenced for those several years, or at least attempted to be silenced. And so that morning when I arrived, again, in solidarity with the Los Angeles chapter of Black Lives Matter as an ally organization with White People for Black Lives, many of us showed up because we care deeply about this issue. We care deeply about the treatment of the victims of police brutality and their families, the ways in which so all too often they're dehumanized in the media and portrayed to be violent aggressors who were responsible for the treatment or their own death at the hands of law enforcement. And so, you know, we want to be able to uplift the fact that we were there as peaceful protesters. We were there to try to get Jackie Lacey to meet with us. And at that moment, when we decided to walk again on her property, on a path up to her doorstep, where we had already made our presence known for, I would say, 20 to 30 minutes. We were already there. They knew that we were there. There was no denying who we were. So when I followed Melina up to that porch and I watched her ring the doorbell, as I was also simultaneously recording the incident myself, we were standing there personally with an expectation that nothing was going to happen and that we would turn around and go back and continue protesting, chanting, drumming, and all of the other pieces that you know we participate in as people are participating in nonviolent direct action. And so I assumed that when we got up there, we would ring the doorbell a couple times, turn around, and just say she decided not to come downstairs. Never in a million years would I have even dreamed that when the door was opening, I didn't even know what was going to happen. And I certainly did not expect that David Lacey would come out with a loaded gun, ready to shoot us, pointing it at Melina, then pointing it at myself, then pointing it all around at Justin with the threats of physical violence and with, you know, a threat to kill. I was completely shocked in that moment. And that in that moment, I had a thought to myself where I just said, well, I have to keep filming because maybe if I continue filming, he won't shoot me. And if he does shoot me, I hope that it does something positive for the movement for Black Lives here in Los Angeles and that some change would come out of my death. And that was literally what came through my mind in that moment. And so I had to reconcile that within myself. I had to reconcile that in the moment and just hope that that he wasn't going to kill me. And that type of reckless action to me was completely unjustified for what it was that we were doing there. We were simply chanting, we were simply drumming, we held space to talk about solidarity with each other and solidarity with the families of police brutality victims. We were there because of love, for love for justice, love for community, love for one another, and wanting to have our voices heard to a political figure who has chosen to disregard her constituency. And so when we have no other methods, because all methods have failed us, we had to, bring attention to her and bring attention to her doorstep. But in no way should her husband have met us with a loaded gun, threats, ready to use it, and completely acting carelessly and recklessly for the regard of human life. And so with that, I will pass it to Justin Marks.
Thank you, Dahlia. Thank you, Melina. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Jasmine. Others didn't say it. I'll say it. I was scared. I was shocked. Again, it's not anything that we expected, not in a million years. It's not anything that's happened before, and nothing that I could see happening that should happen to anybody else, whether you're door knocking, whether you're trick-or-treating after COVID, or your kids are. It seems unreasonable to open the door and to point it a loaded weapon. And I think what was most shocking in the moment was what registered, I think, first to Melina was that metallic sound that we heard behind the door. So there was some intention with what he was doing at the door. But then once he opened it, seeing his finger on the trigger, recognizing that again, a sneeze, a slip, a cough, a sudden movement from any of the three of us, some other noise, anything. It was just wholly irresponsible, reckless. That is not how they teach you to handle guns. Even if it's BB guns, they don't teach children to handle guns that way. And that was the scary part, because I also saw our lives flash, in front of my eyes. And this press conference, this fight afterwards, is not something that necessarily wanted to do, but recognizing that we could have died right then, and that too, that it felt as though Jackie Lacey and her husband were pointing the gun not just at the three of us, but at the 622 families who have been killed, who have family members who have been killed by law enforcement since she's been in office. She pointed a gun at any of the tens of thousands of people who have showed up to her office for the last 3 years. And that's not democracy. That's not what the First Amendment rights are for. That's not. And again, what he did at the door was just not reasonable. It was not safe. It has, it's caused some additional effects for me that were unexpected. Since then, just in terms of. Just not knowing. It calls into question my mortality and you know what I'm saying, just how we're gonna continue to move together and make sure that rights are protected and respected. So I was happy to see the Attorney General press charges, and I think that they were just. And so I hope that that there is an application of law and justice that comes through this, that we are able to prevent this from happening to anybody else, that David Lacey gets some type of gun training. But I hope that that this makes a difference. So again, I'm thankful for the leadership and the vision of Melina. Her being point blank chest range at the end of the gun, being able to continue to stay composed. I feel like that's what saved my life, as well as Dahlia also staying composed and calm in that. But it was definitely in danger on March 2nd.
Thank you so much, folks. You now understand by listening to these great people why Mr. Hicks and I are so privileged to represent them in this struggle. I have been a lawyer for 40 years, and what I've always wanted to do and tried to do was to use my talents and my degree to make this country better. And if I can make this country better, one district attorney at a time, then I will be satisfied. So I thank you for your attention and for coming here today. As Ms. Canick has said, there will be copies of the lawsuit included in the chat, and we are available for a couple of brief questions.
All right, so Steve Gregory from KFI has a question. Steve, go ahead.
Thank you very much, and good morning. Good morning, Carl. Thank you for doing this. Quick question: why the lawsuit? If he's already, as Mr. Lacey's already been charged, and they'll, everyone's going to get their day in court. Why the lawsuit then? I mean, is not the criminal charges enough? And then my second question for Dr. Abdullah. I'm sorry, Melina, but your audio was—I don't know if it was my end or your end, but when you were just getting to the point where you were describing what you were feeling that morning and you were breaking up, I'm wondering if you might be kind enough to sort of recount that again, just briefly, the minute you stepped onto that porch, kind of what was going through your heart and your mind at the time because you were breaking up. Thank you both very much.
And please, Melina, answer that first, which will then lead to my answer.
Great. Can you hear me now? I know that Zoom is sometimes glitchy, so I apologize for that. So honestly, when we stepped onto the porch, I expected, as Dahlia shared, for us to ring the bell, for them to see us. Again, they're very familiar with us. Jackie Lacey is more than familiar with who I am. I expected them to ignore us, for us to go back, and for us to have our own meeting on the sidewalk. I did not expect for David Lacey to open the door with a loaded weapon and point it at my chest. And it was almost in disbelief that I turned to Dahlia when we heard that sound. I turned to Dahlia and said, "That doesn't sound good," and almost chuckled a little bit, thinking I was being paranoid, right? Thinking, no, that couldn't be what it sounds like, right? And then the door opens and this gun is pointed out, and it's pointed at my chest. And the images of my children flashed before me, and I remember these words in my mind saying, is this gonna be how I'm gonna go out? And I hadn't fully processed what it did until afterwards, until, my children described having to come out of class and having to sit with a counselor. My middle daughter, who's probably the most resilient child you've ever met in your life, breaking down and crying, and it comes up repeatedly, crying uncontrollably. And then, anybody will tell you I tend to be very calm, and, having to deal with my emotions and my own trauma and what it would mean for me, not as an organizer, not as a professor, but as a single mother of 3 children, were my life to have ended that day, what that would have meant. And so I wasn't expecting it. I guess I can describe my feelings as also grateful to what Dr. King describes as beloved community, right? That I wasn't on the porch alone, and behind the 3 of us were, 30, 40 other folks who were holding us up with their prayers, with their energy, with, their willingness to stand up. Also standing alongside us were, the spiritual energy of the people on whose behalf we struggle. And so there's a lot of feelings. There's still a lot of feelings. Even talking about it, I'm a little more emotional than I usually am. But I wasn't expecting that. While standing on an open porch of a public official who we have the right to ask for justice.
And Steve, what you hear is the reason why I do what I do. I am a civil rights lawyer on one level, but on a more personal level, I am a personal injury lawyer. And these three proud people are activists on one level, but on a more human level, each of them are people. And as we get into our lawsuit, lawyers for the Laceys are gonna learn the depths of the injury that each of them have sustained through this horrific incident. I don't want Dahlia, I don't want Justin, I don't want Dr. Molina to share with all of you publicly the emotional consequences, the challenges, and the lingering effects, even to this day, that they continue to feel as a consequence for those few moments on that porch in Granada Hills. But make no mistake about it, this is a personal violation to each of their humanity. And the criminal justice system is not designed to compensate the victims for the violations of their humanity. And it is in that spirit that we bring this lawsuit seeking justice.
All right, so we have James from the LA Times. Go ahead, James.
Thanks, Jasmine. Thanks, everybody. Do we have time for two, or should I break it up if we got more time after?
Go ahead.
All right, just really simply, the Lacey's civil attorney has already responded, accusing you guys of either making this political or questioning the timing of it. So I just wanted to, if Carl, if you can quickly just walk me through the why now of it. I'm not an attorney, obviously, but looking at the lawsuit, the allegations seem pretty much, tied to the facts we knew back in March. So if you can just tell me why this is being filed now as opposed to maybe when the criminal investigation finished, I just kind of want to understand that.
I am trying to do what I can on behalf of the people of Los Angeles County. And I represent 3 political activists. So there are dual challenges that I'm facing. On the one hand, there is sincere and serious and severe personal injury. On the other hand, this is a public official, and this horrific case speaks to her judgment, and I think speaks to her fitness to serve the people of Los Angeles for another 4 years. And so I, as the lawyer, made the decision to file this case now so that I could have 20 or so members of the media watching and listening so that the people of the county of Los Angeles can understand how her judgment has been impacted. It's hard being a public official, but it is a job that she seeks. It is a job that she wants, and she works for me as a tax-paying resident of this county. And so if I can use the law to help my clients personally, and then to make a larger political statement as a civil rights lawyer representing 3 civil rights activists, I feel I am duty bound to use my circumstance and to do everything I can to help my clients and to inform the good people of Los Angeles County.
You had one more?
No, Carl in his usual verbosity and knocked out my follow-up in his response. So I'm good, and whoever else wants the floor can have it.
All right, awesome. Does anybody else have any questions? If not, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I don't see any other hands raised. So I think we're good, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.